Ghostface is back, so let's talk about it. So yeah, the new Scream film is out and we are going to talk about it today. This is going to be my review. Now there are spoilers ahead, so if you haven't gone to watch Scream 6, go out, watch it and then come back to the video. But first thoughts on the movie is it's really enjoyable, brings a lot of new to the franchise, and I look forward to seeing where it goes next. But I do have some gripes with it. There are certain things towards the end that are just a little bit like, what? Is this really the direction that this film wants to take? But we'll get to that later on. We're just going to do things a little bit by bit. I might not be talking about every character. I may not talk about every scene, but majority of it is there. So first off, I want to talk about that opening scene. Like, for Scream movies, the opening scene is something that's so important in the movies. And this one is no different. They definitely do something new with this movie that, it feels like something different. Starts out pretty standard in the sense that somebody gets a phone call, it's Ghostface. However, you find out like bit by bit that it's not like usual. Of course, we are talking about the setting of New York in this one, so there are a few things in there that they've used to their advantage when thinking about New York, i.e. the bar scene, i.e. the alleyways. You know what I mean? That very New York feeling. And they use that to the best of their ability in this movie, but it's very much prevalent in the beginning of the movie. And it's actually really good. SAMARA Weaving's character killed off, unfortunately. Of course, we knew based on like what we were seeing in the promo material, trailers, teasers, that she wasn't going to be in it for very long. And we were right. She was the opening kill. However, this is where things get different. So she's some movie professor, and the person that's on the phone, who of course we know as Ghostface, is actually one of her students, who is played by I forget his name, but he played Flash Thompson in the Spider-Man Tom Holland trilogy. Very good actor in this. But, so the scene plays out as we usually do, and then we get to the kill, and you're thinking, this one's different. The Ghostface is standing over her, a little bit Michael Myers-y. It just sort of reminds me of that kind of feeling. And then, of course, you get the reveal that he's taken his mask off, and there he's Flash Thompson. And from this moment on, you're thinking, okay, are we going to follow a Ghostface throughout this movie? Have they really gone bold that you know who the killer is at the start? Because that would be crazy. I would have been in for it. I would have been in for it to see. Just because you know who the killer is, it's just a little bit more like intriguing to see how the characters react around him, and see how they treat him, and see if they ever think he is the killer when he's not, or if he is. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. I would have been very much intrigued to that. But obviously, the scene does go on, and then we get this scene with him and Tara, who's walking by, who's on her way to a Halloween party. And, the interaction of a Ghostface killer interacting with possibly one of the victims is, when you know what you know, it's even more interesting. Like, obviously you look back at some of the older films, you can watch the past 5 films and see the interactions and you don't get that feeling because you already know ahead of time. This one's different because obviously you don't know where it's going at this point for your first time watching. So that's where the excitement is, and oh boy, does it. It riles it up. And this is what I love from this new movie. It gives you something different, and it tension is there from the get-go, and I'm all for it. So obviously then we move on, and he gets told me that he's got like a shrine to the Stab movies and everything. And then he gets a phone call from none other than Ghostface, and it's like he thinks it's his friend who's clearly the second killer in this sort of planned plot. And they're there and they want to continue Richie's idea and Richie's motive and Richie's movie. And of course, you have this Marco Polo moment, which is very, the tension is there from start to finish. And it warms up and everything like that. And then, of course, he opens the fridge and he finds the guy who he thinks he's talking to. And, he's dead. What I've got to give to this film is that it does give you a lot more gore. It gives you a lot more visuals in the sense of like the deaths. The deaths are still pretty standard, but you do get a little bit more time with it. Whereas, in the past you get stabbed, that's it. Or, neck slice, hand over the neck, that kind of thing. Whereas in this film, you get time with the injuries and you get time with the deaths, and it makes it feel a lot more visceral in the sense that it's really gory. And I dig it, I love it. So yeah, obviously he opens the fridge, finds his friend who was the other killer, who he thought he was talking to on the phone, and they're about movies and that, and the killer just goes like, who gives a about movies? And then that's when, and then of course you get the classic like slash. I think he slashes that way. You get the classic slash, and then title card shows up, and it's just like from start to finish of that title card. I think it's one of the best openings. Scream 4 has an interesting opening where they have like different characters from the Stab movies, and when I first saw that, I was I liked it. But on rewatch, that was really there. But I don't see that ever happening with this one. This opening it's fun, it's different, it's interesting. They've always tried to do something different with each opening, because you'll never beat the Drew Barrymore scene from the original film. But you can always expand on that and try to make it better, but you never will. It'll never get to that height. Because as soon as we got the casting for this film, it was like, the first thing you do is start to think, right, okay, so which one of these famous faces, outside of ones that have been on it before, is going to be the first kill? And of course, when you get big names like SAMARA Weaving and the guy that plays Flash Thompson, which I'll pop his name up here now. Of course, you're going to think, well, what's their role in the movie? And you start thinking either A, they're one of the killers, but they're like a silent killer they're in a couple of scenes and that's it, or they're the first kill. And in this instance, we were right, and I think majority of people got that right. So after the title call, we meet with the new, the characters that we left off from the last film. It's been a year since the last events. They've moved to New York. You've got Tara, you've got Mindy and Chad. They're all attending university. And Sam has followed Tara there because she wants to protect her. She's really very protective. Something that I found quite interesting is they had like a bit of a throwaway character. A lot of the people that die in this film are just cannon fodder, just people that were in there. There's not actually all that much death in this film, and certainly not ones that make you feel too much, to be honest. Except for one, just based on the kill itself, and we'll get to that one later. But there's a couple of throwaway characters in this, and one of them is this therapist that Sam Carpenter is talking to, and he's very much just a throwaway character in two scenes. He's in this scene with Sam, and like Sam's saying that she likes to kill, and this therapist is like, well, normally I should be reporting you to the police, you know, but that doesn't happen. That character dies later on in a gnarly way possible, you know, a knife through the face. There are worse ways to go. Probably not in this instance. So yeah, that was quite interesting that they did have that, and you know, it's the problem with horror films. When you get a horror film, they don't have a mountain amount of time to develop characters and stuff. You do get throwaway characters in slasher films, and that's just the way it is. But you know, this is the way they intended it. They didn't think to put him as an important character, so that's fine. But the actor himself is quite familiar. I've seen him in a few things before. Very good actor. But, yeah, and like I say, thrown away in this instance. So, yeah, we meet up with all the characters and see what they're doing now. You see that, like, Tara's at the party. Sam goes to find Tara. And it's like, you know, well, you know, you can't be doing this. You can't be doing that. Tara's like, bugger off, leave me alone. Let me live my life. But that's the sort of like relationship that Tara and Sam are now going through. Is that, like, you know, Sam will not let Tara live her own life and let her do her own thing because of what happened a year ago. She's very overly protective of her sister, and that's something that is, you know, brought up later on and is sort of resolved. Not necessarily throughout the movie, but in the third act it does get resolved. And I actually like that part, I like that aspect. You know, the character sort of development throughout this film is very good. You do get hints towards the Tara Chad being together as well, or liking each other, but there's obviously, we leave the party at this point and you know, things have sort of cooled down, but then on the way home they come across some fans of Richie claiming that Sam had, you know, she was the real killer and she blamed it all on her boyfriend and her friend. And this is an aspect of the film that I really love. There was an aspect of it a little bit in the original Scream, and you get that disgusting girl who puts her finger in her gob after going to the toilet. Ew. But there was that sort of commentary in that film of like, oh no, she's making it up, it's all in her head, or, oh, you know, oh no, she's the one that's doing it, and she's saying that somebody attacked her and all this and that. And they've sort of run with that with this new film, and it's pushed it even more into that sort of realm of people believing things online and conspiracy theories and all this and that. And that is something that, like, you know, in the real world is a problem, and you know, it's something that they've put into the film. Like I say, this is the meta commentary that Scream is well known for, and they do it quite well in this film, in that aspect anyway. So yeah, conspiracy theories are alright. There's the new boyfriend of Sam's that, you know, he's like, oh yeah, no, he's hot, you know, he's this hot guy, blah blah blah. I know him as a character from Arrow. Don't trust him. But, you know, you sort of get this thing of like, oh, I don't want people to know I'm with another guy, and the stigma around it all because of everything that's happening, and she doesn't want to pull him into that. And it's like, it's okay, you know, it's all right of a storyline. It's just really much like a throwaway type thing that, you know, the character's not even there in the third act. It gets left behind. I mean, for good reason. And I kind of like the difference of like, look, I want to rule you out. I don't want you to get hurt and things like that. And it ends up being that he's not actually one of the killers. So that's quite a intriguing side to it. But in this scene, we get like them getting on when they're arguing and things like that. But we do find some other characters as well. There's Quinn. There is Ethan, and then there's the character that I actually forgotten the name of, and off the top of my head, I can't think of the name at all. But it's Mindy's girlfriend, and we get introduced to these characters along the way. I'm not sure if it was the same scene. That's something like, you know, the smaller scenes can't quite remember everything. But there's a scene where Quinn mentions about the fact that she had a brother who died. And at this moment, my first thought was, oh my god, it was her brother Richie. And knowing who her dad is, that gave me two of the killers from the get-go. And I was kind of like, at that moment, I thought, right, is that Richie? And is this a revenge story? And I started to think, okay, so they've gone down and Scream 2 route. With the bit of, like, you know, the Mrs. Loomis. You know, the Billy's mother. But, you know, I started to think this and I started to think, oh, great, I've just figured it out. And we're barely half hour into the film. Predictable, really. And honestly, when I think about some other things, it's quite obvious. It's more obvious, but this is the moment that I realised at least two of the killers. One of them did shock me because I wasn't expecting there to be three. I wasn't thinking there was going to be three. So one of them was a tiny bit of a shock, but he's the one that looks the most like Richie. So, mind blown, I guess. But, yeah, it was that made me think, right, well, okay, is Richie her brother? Which means that the detective, her dad, was obviously Richie's dad. Therefore, Richie and Quinn are on a revenge spree against the person who killed their brother and son. You know? And this was the case. And it pissed me off. It pissed me off a little bit that by the end of the film, I was pissed off because I figured it out. And if I can figure it out, me, little old me, who I don't try to claim that I'm smart or anything, but little old me can figure it out. Anyone can figure it out. Anyone. So yeah, you know, these little issues were popping up in earlier acts, but just tiny little bits here and there. So yeah, we move on, and obviously the copper says, look, we need you to come in because they've found the ID card of Sam's at the crime scene. And so on their way to the cop shop, the killer does call them, but it's through Richie's phone. And at this point as well, this just solidified my theory of who the killer is. Right, but they go into this bodega type, you know, this little store on the street and everything, and that's the scene that I think, you know, a lot of people were a little bit like, oh, Ghostface is using a shotgun. Do we really need a Ghostface that uses a shotgun? But this scene was really, really intense, and it was really good, and, you know, you see the you see how quick Ghostface is in this moment, and it's just like, it's the really good use of New York that we were talking about earlier, of like, in Woodsboro, you imagine this scene like going playing out in that store in the first film, and it's like, I don't know, there's just certain energy to New York, because you see obviously characters, you know, these girls run in, and there's a guy in the queue, and it's like, hey, no, I'm first, sort of thing, you know, calm down, bitches. But then the killer comes along, and it's like, the girls take a step back, and this guy is just like, can I help you, dude? And it's just very much reminds me of a New York sort of thing. So anyway, they get to the cop shop. This is where we find out, of course, that like Kirby's alive and everything like that, and she's now an FBI agent, and she's sort of taking on the thing. This is where we get the sort of therapist gets killed off sort of like down the line. But I think we are probably going to be skipping a couple of scenes here now. But the next scene I want to talk about is the moment in the house where, like, at this point, everyone knows that there's a ghost face and everything. And we get this sort of, like, scene where everyone's in the house and everything's fine and they're all having a chat and it's like core 4 and all this and that. That's not the part I want to talk about. But now the part I want to talk about is the ghost face. So, in this moment, right, you have Quinn who's on the phone to her dad. And you have, I believe she was on the phone to her dad or Ghostface. One or other. And you have the Ghostface that kills her, right? So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, so she's on the phone to the killer, but the killer's right behind her. See, I don't know if it was her father or the killer, but either way, when you look at it, it doesn't make sense from the point of view of what I thought was the killers. It doesn't make sense. Later on in the film, when you realise who the killers are, it doesn't make sense either, because there's, who's this for? You know what I mean? Of course, you do get the boyfriend, the neighbour, Sam's boyfriend. He sees this going on, and he's trying to get in contact with Sam and everything. But I think that this moment was just to solidify the fact that, you know, yeah, we're going to attack them at the house, but we need something some reason as to why we might be there, other than just to attack them. You know what I mean? They needed more of a solidified reason as to why they were there. It can't just be, oh, they show up and it happens. It's got to be that they're there to kill somebody and then it happens. So yeah, Queen is stabbed and dead at this point. And then obviously you get into the room and Sam gets the text that, oh, Ghostface is there, get out of there. So then we have this moment when Mindy gets cut and it's like, oh god, not again sort of thing. Here we go. And then you get the character that, again, can't remember the name of, so I apologise for this, but Mindy's girlfriend, she gets stabbed in the gut and then twists the knife and lifts it up. Ooh. Yeah, I don't know how she's walking around after that. But, you know, tension, they get in the bedroom and they're like, right, okay, well, we've only got one way out now. Like, because they couldn't get past Ghostface to the front door to get out. So they've only got one way out, and that is through the boyfriend's apartment. They get across through the ladder. The tension in this scene is crazy. From one window to another, trying to get out of there, and each character's going, and the Ghostface is getting closer and closer. And this is where we get this moment where it's like, the last character's getting along, and it's the girlfriend. It's Mindy's girlfriend. And just the tension from going from the one window to another, and she's got this stab wound, and she's like, oh my god, I can't go. And the Ghostface gets in the room, and it's this moment where like the Ghostface puts the knife into the windowsill, and or window pane in America, I guess they call them, or whatever they call them in there. But yeah, he stabs the knife into there, and he starts to shake the ladder. And it's like, you know full well the character's going. There's no way they're doing this tension-filled scene. But, of course, this is what I was talking about earlier about how, like, the use of gore and not necessarily the kills themselves being inventive. I mean, obviously this is new. But anyway, the girlfriend does fall. And this is what I was talking about before, like the dumpster. She hits the dumpster on the ground, and then you get a moment with her face that I don't think anybody wanted a moment with her face in this scene. And it's all messed up. Half the face is all messed up. And it's gnarly and gory, and I love it. It's good. It's a good moment in the film, and it's a good scene. But then, of course, Ghostface gets away, the cops get along. And of course, this is the way you get like the detective finding out his daughter's dead. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, so maybe I have got it wrong with the Queen thing. But surely I've got it right with him. And the Richie thing. You know? I'm thinking, at this point, like I'm thinking, you know, maybe there's another Ghostface that's just gone a bit rogue. Like, maybe the person he's working with wasn't meant to kill Queen. That could have been, like, something that could have been really interesting if there was a killer that they got that was just helping them out, rather than being a relative, and was helping the copper out, because he knew that his background, he was a bit estranged or whatever. Met on the fandoms, whatever you call it. You know, any sort of way of going about it. That could have made it a little bit more interesting. Because then there's a sort of defiance within the ranks type thing. So then at the end, it's like, oh, you shouldn't have killed my daughter. You were not meant to kill my daughter. That kind of thing. Of course, doing it like that, then you don't get that. You know, it wouldn't make sense in the sense of like having that scene where they're moaning about that at the end. That's something that they would have a conversation about during the film that we would not see, and there'd be no point in us seeing. But the way that they could do it is they could have, so they could have the characters at the end of the film, and they are aware of this. They're aware that Quinn was killed, and they could use that against the killers to distract them. That would have been more intriguing, and you know, there's just a little bit of a different level there of what they could have done, but instead they did it the way they did it, and it's a little bit there. So anyway, we do go back to the cop shop sort of thing, and there's like there's the wall that where there's like everything, like all the masks and stuff like that, and all the killers all up on one wall, and there's a question mark next to Stu Marker. Now, there are two things that this question mark could mean. I am more for the second theory as to what it is. The first theory of the question mark is why is he alive or dead? That is something that obviously has been sort of wanted by the fans. They were meant to do it in the third one, but it was a little bit too similar to something that happened in real life, because it was meant to be like a cult of Stu or something like that with the ghost faces and stuff. So instead they went with a different direction of Roman and all that. But ever since then, people have wanted Stu back. Do I want Stu back? I think it would be good, as long as it's not ruined. But again, because when you look at every single one of these Scream films, it's always a whodunit, right? So if you have a Scream film where you're watching it all the way through and you're thinking, who's the killer? Is it one of these newbies? Is it one of the old bees? Whatever. And then you get the killer reveal and it's somebody that you've not met in the film. Or it's somebody from years ago. It just sort of takes away the whodunit and becomes something else. So, I'm not sure if I should do it. The ladder of this question mark, the second sort of theory as to why the question mark is there is that the fact that they haven't come across his mask yet. They haven't come across these last two masks. And I think that is probably the excuse for it. That is probably the reason why there's a question mark there. It's not to do with the fact that Stu could be alive or dead. You know, I think the filmmakers know what they're doing at this point, because there was a line later on that we'll get to in those scenes. But yeah, for me, that's what that means. But anyway, so of course another scene that we do get is of them trying to find the killer. And they go to Central Park and they're there. Like, and it's very much like the Randy scene. You're starting to think, oh God, who's going to get it? Who's the lovable character that's going to get it? You know, they're trying to track down Ghostface. And they're tracking down to Gail's house. And Gail, you know, goes through this whole conversation. It's like, you know, I'm Gail fucking Weathers. I've gone through this 5 fucking times. What do you think is going to happen next? And that. And it's like, then you get a dumb moment from Gail. What's the point? You know? Yeah, you know, I like the back and forth that she has with Ghostface. It's one of the first, I think it is the first interaction she has with Ghostface over the phone as well. So I understand that, but it's just like, why would you make such a character like Gail Weathers, who is smart, but a bit of a bitch, and do something so stupid as to walk out of a room that only has one entrance, and she's got a gun right at the door with bullets in it? It doesn't make sense. You know, she gets stabbed a couple of times, and you know, there's this moment where Sam and Terry get there. They've got there quite quick, and it's like, you know, they're holding Sam, and they're holding Gail, and Sam and Gail says to Sam, "No, you know, just tell Sydney he did not get me. Tell Sydney that Ghostface did not get me." And of course, at this point, you're thinking, oh my god, they've killed off a legacy character in a good and effective scene. That's not what they've done. And this is one of the gripes I have with the film that we'll get onto a little bit later on. But what's the point in doing that? And then not following through that. Then Kirby sort of calls up and says, look, I've got a plan. So they all end up going on the train. They get cut off. So Mindy's on her own with somebody who's a prime suspect for her, which is Ethan. And you get this moment, like, you know, this is the big tension moment, and it was in the teasers and trailers. Why would you put that scene there? Why would that go there? That's just for me. Not necessarily why would you put that scene there, but why would you put the scene in the teasers and the trailers and ruin the best scene in the movie? Buffet? What the hell's that? Per se. Why would you do that? You should not be doing that in your movie. Do not ruin scenes. Like, I get it, sometimes it's not the filmmaker's fault. Sometimes it's the studios who meddle. But come on. Don't show your best scene in the trailers and teasers. You know, just to get, you know, butts in seats. Don't do that. So anyway, we get on, and Mindy's attacked and presumably killed. You know? And she's like, oh god, I got it wrong. I got it wrong again. Because Ethan's there like, help, help, help. And yeah, it's just, you know, what, like, we knew this was coming throughout the film. And the best scene of the film. And it's ruined through the trailers. Not good. So anyway, they get to the one thing that obviously I have forgotten to point out at this point is that they've already been at the shrine location. So they've been there since then, and then they've gone back for this scene. But for me, like, you know, you have the moment where they're all looking around, and that was a previous scene. I'm going into the final scene now. The motive and all that. The big last 10 minutes of the film. Well, probably about 10-15 minutes. But you do get a few of these little moments between characters that I really love. The best one, of course, being the Kirby and Mindy sort of interaction. Did anybody else get a little bit of a love thing from that? I don't know. Maybe it was just me. Could that be an angle they go with in the future? Who knows? But, you know, you have this moment where they're like, you know, they're going through movies and it's like, you know, favourite, I know it very straight the original. Candyman remake or original, both. You know, there's these little things, and it's just a little hint to the fact that Kirby used to be a big horror film fan, and now she's just an FBI agent. There was none of that throughout the rest of the film, but in this one, like in this particular moment, Kirby was the scream for Kirby for a moment, which really, you know, it just solidifies the fact that, you know, she's not really changed all that much. Then you get the scene with Tara and Chad, and it's like, it's heartbreaking really at this moment, because they've just sort of finally gone forward with the fact that they like each other and everything like this. But then, of course, the Ghostface comes in and starts stabbing Chad like a nutter all over the place. Chad does get one up on the Ghostface, but then, of course, gets smashed. Well, no, he doesn't get smashed. Chad goes to pick up a pinball machine thing and like goes like, you know, fuck this, and but over another Ghostface, the second Ghostface comes in and starts stabbing him again. So you're getting multiple stabs from these Ghostfaces, and then, you know, Tara is crying her eyes out, and it's a really good scene. And, you know, it just really reinforces the fact that, you know, we're in the last stretch now. Anything could happen. But, of course, at this point, we've already had the phone call, I believe, to say that oh, don't trust Kirby. It may have been before that or after that. I think it was before that because I'm sure we didn't see Ghostface before. We didn't see Ghostface before getting the phone call, like type of thing. So I think the Kirby phone call from Detective Maroney, or whatever his name was. I think that's his real name, isn't it? Dermot Maroney. I think it is. The phone call's coming from Dermot Maroney's character. And I think, you know, at this point it's like, you know, don't trust Kirby. She hasn't worked for the FBI for 2 months. And at that point I'm thinking, you know full well that that's not the case. Because you're the killer. So, like, obviously he must be only around the corner, but he's acting like he's miles away and can't help. But anyway, of course, then you get the moments where like Ghostface, ooh, face off, and then we get the reveal. And it's the fucking detective. It's not Kirby. Of course, it's not Kirby. Don't be stupid. But yes, we get the reveal that the detective is in fact Richie's father. We get the reveal that Ethan, the twat, is Richie's brother. But there is a third Ghostface. And who is the third Ghostface? Yep. It's Mindy. No, it's not Mindy. Of course not. They do assume it's Mindy for a moment and it's like, what? Of course not, no. It's revealed to be Quinn. They faked Quinn's death. Of course they faked Quinn's death. He's a fucking detective. He can get it done. Even if it is his daughter. They are the family of Richie and they want revenge on the people that killed Richie. Why? Okay, yes, they're trying to do a little bit of a Scream 2 thing and sort of bring it to that Mrs. Loomis type thing. But it doesn't work. There's so many things that just doesn't work. I mean, don't get me wrong. On first viewing, I really enjoyed it. I've only watched it once. But when I've thought about it more and more, I just realised just how ridiculous it is. I like the fact that they used 3 killers for once. And for me, just falls flat a little bit. But, you know, we get some interesting moments in this. Like, you know, there's the parts where it's like Tara and Sam, like that the moments I was talking about before, where like you have to let her go. Sam has to let Tara go to try and help. You know, they've got one killer coming at them from one angle. They got another killer at the bottom trying to stab the other killer. You know, so at this moment, the only way to get away from this is to let her go, to let Tara go, and it's like it's a sort of commentary of like, you need to let me go, full stop. You know, I understand that you're being protective of me, but it's time. And that's what I was like talking about earlier, the character development. I like this. I really do. I like the way they implemented it into this last scene. But I don't know, there's a sort of cheesy, campy way that the main, what you could call the main killer in this film, which is of course the detective, Dermot Maroney. And I just think that, like, you know, this guy is a good actor. I've seen him in a few things, and he can act. But for some reason, this just didn't suit him. You know, whether it's a director, the way they direct him, or whether it's just the way he wants to perform it, it's weird. I don't like it. But of course, you do get the scene as well later on where Sam kills the detective, and she gets the costume on. It's a bit like Scream 1, but less justified. There's no need to put the costume on. There's no point. Whereas there was a point in the first film, but you know, I just don't want to talk about it really. But you get the moment where Sam's like, yeah, no, just do it. You know, you don't have to be ashamed. Don't, just do it, you know, he's killed our family. We'll, you know, screw it. He kills them, you know. And then And then, of course, you find out that Ethan's still alive after this fight. You know, everyone's dead. One killer is always alive. And Kirby comes along, pushes the TV, and she's like, she has that one line of like, oh, I'm sure I've seen that in a horror movie sometime. And it's like, you know, hint, hint. But then, of course, so this is at the point where we're coming to the closing end, right? And they're outside and they're like, yeah, we're okay, we survived. Tara starts crying and it's like, well, not everyone survived. Of course, as well, Mindy comes around. She's alive, running around with a stab wound. Why? And then you find out that Chad's alive as well. No. Oh yeah, and in one little fleeting line, there's the line that Gale is alive as well. So that's what, 4 fake out deaths in this movie alone. What's the point? You know, these films start to get more and more ridiculous. Not quite like Fast and Furious, but there are aspects of it that get more and more ridiculous. I just can't sometimes. Sometimes it's just so difficult to do that. Why would you do that? But I digress. The whole film in general is great. You know, there's no doubt about it that this is probably one of the best Scream sequels. It's just that, it's just the little nitpicks that I have about the last few moments and the characters and how people are acting and how things turned out. You know, which does sound like a lot, but it's not. I actually really enjoyed this movie, and I enjoyed the experience of the movie. It's just that, I don't know. I just wish there was a bit more to it than what the typical revenge. Like I say, there was a small fix in there. Rather than make Ethan his son, make Ethan somebody that he's helping. Like, again, yeah, that does feel like a bit of a cop-out of Billy Loomis. Billy Loomis's mom, Mrs. Loomis, and I'm blanking on characters today and names. This guy, that would sort of be a clown of that, but at least, you know, with the inclusion of killing Queen, who was not meant to die, the characters could have pushed that. I think that could have even just made it a little bit more. There could have been just a little bit more in depth of this scene. But unfortunately, we get what we get. I'm not hating on it. I do enjoy Scream movies, and I enjoyed this one. And so yeah, look forward to seeing what they do next. Do I think they'll run with the Stu thing? Maybe. That's one thing I forgot to say, is that Stu does get mentioned again in that scene where Mindy and Kirby talk and have a moment, and you know, she says, like, you know, if you believe the conspiracy theories online that he's dead. They're playing with us right now. They know what we want. They know what fans want. And they're playing with it. It's not good. So, do I see them running with the Stu thing? Maybe. Maybe not. It depends on what the story is. It needs to work. But I did really enjoy this movie. I don't think it's an awful movie. Do I think it's the best sequel since Scream 1? No. Will you find out what I do think is the best sequel since Scream 1? Yes. You will. That is in a video coming up on the channel tomorrow. You will see that tomorrow. So, yeah, Screen ranking coming up tomorrow. Don't miss that out. That's going to be a lot shorter of a video. I'm not going to talk about the films as much, but that is coming tomorrow. So anyway, that is the video for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, it's a lot of rambling, a lot of talking. It's just me in front of the camera. I will put up some pictures as I talk about certain moments, just so that you're not just looking at me, because I feel sorry for you guys. But anyway, I've been Screwball. This has been Screwball Sphere, and I'll see you next time, folks. Good. What? There's not always an after credit scene at the end of the film.